What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Eddie Hearn, Daniel Dubois, and company. Eddie Hearn names a fighter that deserves a title shot well ahead of Daniel Dubois. Eddie Hearn has weighed in on Daniel Dubois' shot at Alexander Usyk and has claimed that another British heavyweight would be more deserving of the fight. With an undisputed clash with Fury now dead, the WBA have ordered that Usyk fights Dubois, giving the two respective teams until the start of next month to negotiate terms, at which stage purse bids will be ordered. And this is what Eddie Hearn had to say. He said, "I like Daniel Dubois, but who on earth has he beat to become mandatory for Alexander Usyk? Trevor Bryant, Kevin Lerena, Bogdan Dinu? Listen, fair play to him. I think Joe Joyce should be getting a shot well ahead of him, but good luck to him. I don't necessarily believe he will be ready for that fight." Those are the words of Eddie Hearn, and let me counterpunch. Everybody knows that Daniel Dubois doesn't deserve a shot over Joe Joyce. Why? Because Joe Joyce beat Daniel Dubois. He beat him. He made him quit in the 10th round of their fight. He fractured his eye socket by multiple jabs to that eye that damaged throughout that course. And he took some time off and still came back and still got put in position to become the WBA mandatory by becoming the WBA regular champion. Now, for Eddie to ask that, though, he needs to be careful for throwing stones in a glass house, because he also knows how this business works. It's about the promotional backing and the power and the strength thereof. Okay. Frank Warren had his investments in Daniel Dubois and made sure Daniel Dubois got the right opportunities. Whereas Joe Joyce, an older fighter, slower fighter, undefeated, but not as promised as Daniel Dubois, didn't really go through those loops. He decided to go through the avenue of the WBO, okay? And we all know what happened with that. Okay, the WBO was, the mandatory was Alexander Usyk until he got his shot. Well, supposedly, when the undisputed fight in 2021 between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury was taking place, and Eddie Hearn was running all over the place to get that fight done, the WBO then held Alexander Usyk back to fight the number 2 at the time, which was Joe Joyce. And they had a purse bid, which was a very very unfair split, because Alexander Usyk and his team wanted like 93% to like the 7% for Joe Joyce. But understand, the WBO had already awarded Alexander Usyk the mandatory to fight the champion, which was Anthony Joshua. Now, for all you Tyson Fury fans, that should be some fuel for you guys, and talking about unfair splits, right? Because it was like a weird type of negotiation, and I think that was retaliation from Team Usyk, because they were like, well, what are you doing, WBO? Because we are already awarded to fight the guy, Anthony Joshua, which holds the belt. Okay, so, a lot was going on. So they kind of like went back on their rules and created a situation or a scenario where Joe Joyce was going to take on Alexander Usyk. Well, it fell apart because the undisputed fight fell apart. Since the undisputed fight fell apart, they went away with that scenario and re-granted Alexander Usyk to fight Joshua, and we know what happened. He beat Joshua and became the unified heavyweight champion of the world. But around that same time, okay, from 2021 and 2022, Daniel Dubois did come back. He did heal that eye, thank God. and he did put himself in situations for the WBA regular. Well, that belonged to Trevor Bryant, but before Trevor Bryant, it belonged to Mahmoud Char. Okay, Mahmoud Char was pretty much ripped off by Mr. DK Don King, only in America, baby. And he had some type of visa problems fighting in Florida, where he was stripped. And Trevor Bryant ended up fighting someone, I forget his name, and obtaining the WBA regular. Well, Frank Warren then pressed those buttons, pulled the strings for Daniel Dubois to fight Trevor Bryant, because then Trevor Bryant was the WBA. So he knocked out Trevor Bryant in 4 rounds with a left hook that he didn't see. And Daniel Dubois became the WBA regular. Okay, so that's the story in a nutshell. All right. So you had 2 guys, Joe Joyce going for the WBO, and then Daniel Dubois, going for or through the WBA route. All right. So that's what happened with those 2 gentlemen. Okay. So now does Joe Joyce deserve that? But understand, this is boxing. Joe Joyce will eventually get his turn, though, because he is still high up on the WBO, because he did what? He knocked out the #1 WBO guy at the time, Joseph Parker. Now he is that #1 guy. All right. But who is the WBO champion? Alexander Usyk. But Usyk, of course, has to go through the IBF, then the WBA, then the IBF, then the WBO. So he's a unified champion. So he has to fulfill those in order, or they will strip him. All right. So back to Eddie Hearn thinking, well, hey, he deserves this shot or over Daniel Dubois. I see it, but at the same time, you have to understand boxing and the politics thereof and what your choice is. Because I think Joe Joyce could have lobbied for the WBA, but a lot was going on with the WBA, like I just explained. But would Eddie Hearn, or should I say Daniel Dubois, would he be ready for Alexander Usyk? Well, only time will tell, because he had another injury in the Kevin Ledena fight on the undercard of Fury and Chisora 3. So we just have to see. But if he's not ready, I don't think that would stop Frank Warren for throwing him in there, because it is a title opportunity. It's a multi-title opportunity, because Alexander Usyk is a unified champion. So, he would probably still throw him in there half-ass, just to get that opportunity, hoping Daniel Dubois would pull an upset, and then they don't have to worry about Alexander Usyk at all anymore. So we'll see what happens with that. But you guys tell me what you think about Eddie Hearn claiming that Daniel Dubois does not deserve a title shot over Joe Joyce. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.